I'm Eris Papadopoulos.
And hello, I'm meteorologist Eric Salna.
And welcome to Built to Survive.
This is a 30-minute program brought to you by the Resilience News Network. And we're here to discuss the latest extreme weather and hazard events that trigger disasters around the world.
And examine why homes, buildings, and communities fail to survive. We go behind the scene to understand the root causes of vulnerability and extract lessons on how you can survive.
And today's program will have 4 segments. In the first 2, we will overview the biggest disasters that we've seen so far this year, first in the United States and then internationally.
Then we'll interview Rob Fetell, the university student who started the Resilience Youth Network, and see how the next generation is facing resilience.
And then in our final segment, we'll introduce you to the Resilience Action Fund and the Extreme Events Institute at Florida International Universities, 2 organizations that we are very passionate about.
Please stay with us and learn what it takes to be built to survive.
So, Eris, this certainly has been an eventful year for United States hazards.
Indeed, Eric, we've seen a lot: fires, tornadoes, hurricanes, and floods.
And as of November, we're going to talk about wildfires now. The National Interagency Fire Center has reported almost 50,000 fires that have burned over 6.5 million acres. Just in California alone, 2.5 million acres and 3,600 buildings were destroyed. The Dixie Fire in July burned almost 1 million acres and 1,400 buildings.
Indeed, a tremendous disaster. California now requires that homes be rebuilt to higher fire standards. That means non-combustible materials for structure, the roof, the siding, plus fire-rated windows and doors. Unfortunately, other states like Oregon and Colorado are still lagging.
And now switching gears to other hazards, let's talk about hurricanes and tropical storms that have hit the Gulf and the Atlantic coasts. Ida, Elsa, Henry, we've had 4 Category 3s, and 2021 is now the 4th costliest hurricane season on record, over $70 billion.
$70 billion. Louisiana and Texas were repeatedly hit. This year, Florida was spared. But when will we learn? The Gulf and Atlantic coast still refuse to adopt the South Florida standard for hurricanes in their building codes. They think they're saving money, but they're costing themselves and U.S. taxpayers a bundle.
And that's so true, Eris. That's being very short-sighted, especially when experts predict that storms will become more frequent and intense. South Florida's building codes have proven to withstand hurricane-force winds, and they certainly should be adopted.
Indeed. On tornadoes, we've had over 70 tornadoes greater than an EF2 strike this year. Building codes can hardly handle an EF1 tornado. In June, an EF1 hit a Chicago suburb, damaging over 150 homes. Only the little town of Moore, Oklahoma, has actually adopted a standard to deal with an EF2 hurricane. Mm-hmm. Every other jurisdiction just keeps dragging their feet.
And Texas and Kansas were the worst hit this year. The insurance-led Fortified can also handle an EF2. South Florida's standards can resist an EF3. So the question is, why are officials not incorporating these into codes?
A big topic, and one that we'll get into more in later shows. We'll investigate what lobbies are keeping our codes low and vulnerable, and why.
So now, switching to severe floods across the eastern United States. We saw dangerous inland flash floods, like in Tennessee, and the Ida-related disasters in New York and New Jersey.
Anyone with property less than 15 feet above water, sea, river, or near the bottom of a valley or gully should be on alert.
And now on our former wetlands, so much development has happened on wetlands and floodplains. Local officials, they've permitted it all. And so many people don't even know that they're living on a floodplain.
Indeed, government's flood maps are not reliable. They're largely political, not technical maps. Towns and cities lobby intensively to minimize them. I prefer to use an independent source, a non-government, nonprofit that has an online resource called floodfactor.com. It's easy, has about 150 million homes. You just put in the address, and they're not asking you to put in any personal information or trying to sell you something.
So floodfactor.com, especially if you're looking to buy or rent a property.
Eric, let's now turn to international disasters. We had an earthquake in Haiti, floods in Germany and China, and fires in Greece and Turkey.
And the 7.2 Richter earthquake in August in Haiti was absolutely devastating. Over 2,000 people died, 140,000 homes and buildings were damaged or destroyed. And you would think construction in Haiti improved since the 2010 earthquake.
Unfortunately, not much. A lot of construction is still unplanned and without permits and unchecked. You see poor quality materials and faulty workmanship. They haven't yet cataloged all the damage, so we don't know how many of those buildings were built after the 2010 earthquake.
So, of course, an earthquake of this magnitude would be disastrous in the United States, like in urban California.
For sure. Many older homes and buildings have not yet been retrofitted. Would be even worse if the Madrid fault in the Memphis area were to have an earthquake. Unfortunately, people and officials there have taken very little into account that risk, and they need to.
Now, turning to fires, you were personally in Greece when it faced a string of wildfires that burned 300,000 acres.
Yes, I was. But you know, not that many buildings were destroyed. For many years, they've used non-combustible materials. Here in the U.S., homes just add more fuel to the fire.
So it's interesting that Greece has 1/3 the per capita income of California, but they spend more for resilient homes to both fires and earthquakes.
Very true. You know, personally, I feel safer in Greece than I do in richer California. Comes to show that resilience is affordable if you make it a priority.
So there you have it, an eventful year for sure, filled with important lessons. So stay with us. We'll be talking next to Rob Fetell, the university student who founded the Resilience Youth Network.
Welcome back to our show. And Rob, welcome to our program. Tell us about yourself and what really got you passionate about resilience.
Thank you for having me, Eris and Eric. So I'm a Master of Science in Engineering Geology student at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm from Miami Beach. So the fragility of our built environment is rather personal for me. As a child in Miami Beach, I actually remember waking up to dead fish on our lawn after Hurricane Wilma. And more recently, after the Surfside condo collapsed, I was struck by the devastating impact of the decades-long saltwater corrosion and my hometown's really short-sighted rejection of resilient building practices. And so I wrote an op-ed that was published in the Miami Herald about ways to improve solid construction and community resilience in the wake of some of the lessons we learned. I worked for the City of Miami Beach Land Use and Sustainability Commissioner and helped organize the Miami Beach Vision Project. So really for me, resilience, my interest in it stems from my passion for protecting my community.
So Rob, what made you start the Resilience Youth Network?
So my generation is going to have to deal with the short-sighted planning and decision-making of policymakers today. And it occurred to me that there are lots of different organizations at different institutions that focus on resilience and adaptation, but none that brand themselves explicitly as the young people. And I think it's a very powerful notion that young people should have a greater say in the way that their communities adapt to climate change. So I help our members collaborate and share ideas to advance a stronger, safer, and more resilient future for their own communities.
That's a great initiative, Rob. What exactly do you feel that the Resilience Youth Network can achieve, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so we want to help our members promote their ideas. So whether that be to network to find careers and make an impact by, putting their ideas forward in their work, to create a social community of like-minded students and young professionals who are committed to resilience. Essentially, what we're trying to do is build the next generation thought leaders in the resilience space. So this is very multidisciplinary. We have engineers, civil engineers. We have people in insurance and accounting, landscape architecture and planning. Really, resilience touches so many different fields and professions. The idea is we want to get everyone together over our shared passion for these issues and collaborate on projects to really stand up to some systemic failures to invest in resilience as the young people.
So how can people get involved, and what are different ways to participate?
Well, yeah, definitely check out our website. We have a member pledge. So if you're 18 to 30 years old, it's free to participate. If you sign up, you'll be added to our listserv and you'll hear about our events. We recently held one with two senior members of FEMA in disaster response and community preparedness, and two senior managing directors from Widow O'Brien's, which is a private sector crisis management and emergency response business. And going forward, we're going to have more events relating to, some of the diverse fields that I mentioned already. And so there's really a place for everyone in this organization, as long as you care about resilience and what we see as the most pressing, necessary challenge of our time.
I've looked at the website. It's an excellent start, and also listened in on the webinar that you had, and very exciting to see the interaction between the speakers later and the young members. And I think you mentioned 18 to 30 or 35, I think, is the range, right? 35, I read?
Well, there's no hard cutoff. We're not trying to exclude anyone.
Okay. But definitely the 60 years old, like ourselves here, should be excluded.
Yeah, fortunately, I don't think you guys are.
Well, Rob, what are the biggest challenges you think that face your generation forward in terms of resilience and climate and adaptation, all those things?
Yeah, so, listening to you guys speak earlier in the show, I think the data democracy is one of the biggest issues. People need to understand the codes where they live, the real risks of failing to invest in resilience. I think that we need to have preventive instead of reactive investment. You guys were talking about wildfires, for instance. I think there's 10 times more money it costs 10 times as much to suppress wildfires instead of investing in preventing them with controlled burns and such. And so when I think about building to survive, we need to stop building in risky locations with cheap and weak materials. And we need the young people to kind of take this on and say, we have a responsibility to make sure that whatever is at least starting now doesn't follow some of these previous failures.
Well, this is great to see that it's the next generation now that's going to be taking the mantle for resilience. And I think they're definitely going to do a better job than the previous generation.
You mean our generation did? Yeah, exactly. Rob, thank you for joining us on Built to Survive. Good luck in your studies and with Resilience Youth Network. To our dear audience, stay with us. We'll be talking next about two organizations that are working to make homes and communities more resilient.
Well, in this final segment of Built to Survive, we're going to be talking about two organizations that are leading the way when it comes to resilience: the Resilience Action Fund and the Extreme Events Institute at Florida International University.
Well, I'm really excited to have this segment to kind of talk about our interest in the whole topic of resilience. Eric, tell us how you went from TV weather broadcaster to being the director at the Extreme Events Institute at Florida International University, and what you do there.
Well, it's been certainly quite a journey. Certainly my first passion was, always has been meteorology. And that was certainly displayed during a career in television. But then I left full-time television to get more into weather and resilience education and research. And that's what eventually had me end up at FIU at the Extreme Events Institute. So at the Institute, we're all about doing research on natural hazards. And so we have several programs that deal with that. First of all, we have an insurance model. It works with the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation. And then we also have a storm surge model where we work with NOAA and the National Hurricane Center. And of course, we're going to be talking about our wall of wind. But, looking at our website and our homepage, you're going to see an equation. And that equation sums it up. It's another way to talk about what we're talking about here, Eris, when we talk about hazards. On the left side of the equation, we have emergencies, disasters, and then catastrophes. But the right side will determine how bad that end result is going to be. So you're going to have H, which is the hazard, which we've already talked about today. So many hazards across the U.S. and internationally. But then you have the EX and the V, exposures and vulnerabilities. So exposures, as we all know, is how much people and buildings are in harm's way. And the vulnerability part is now how resilient are we to that hazard? How well prepared? What are our building policies like? What are our building codes like? So this Built to Survive show we're going to really focus, and on that part of it too, the V part of that equation, the vulnerabilities and how we can improve upon that so our disasters aren't so bad. So as I mentioned, we have various programs related to hazards on that, but certainly the wall of wind. And that's 12 fans where we can create up to Category 5 hurricane conditions, including water. So this is a way now to take structures, actually test them, Eris, to hurricane force winds for their aerodynamics and to their strength to wind, so that ultimately we can make stronger structures, and that would eventually translate to businesses and schools and homes, and enhancing the building codes. And as we already mentioned, the Florida building codes are the strongest in the nation, but they need to be brought to other states all across the country so we can make them more resilient as well. So that's what the Extreme Events Institute is all about. And then I help communicate all these messages of resilience through various education and outreach programs as well, taking it out into the community so they can see not only the research that we're doing, but the value and the importance of resilience.
So important to this testing of homes and building components. Car companies can't sell a car until they crash test it. And yet millions of people in this country have been sold homes that we know are failing to the crashes. Let's put it this way. Now, at the wall of wind, you can crash test that house and see how well it tests. And a lot of houses are not testing that well,
Right, and that's what the wall of wind is able to then illustrate, and it's just simple techniques that you can do to any structure to make it much stronger and more resilient.
Yeah, it should be a requirement for any home that's sold in the future. And I'm intimidated a little bit sometimes by these equations, but the bottom line is that V, that vulnerability, is what we control.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we need to work on, not so much blaming the H as we try to do.
The
often.
H's, the hazards are always going to come, right? That's a given. So knowing that they're always going to come, then we need to prepare to be resilient. So from the Extreme Events Institute, Eris, let's go to your passion, the Resilience Action Fund.
Well, as you know, Eric, I'm a World Trade Center 9/11 survivor. I was there in the center during that day and thank God survived. And after that, I started looking at buildings and homes in a different way because I asked myself, why is this so vulnerable? Why will a hazard destroy this rather than why is the hazard so strong? And it made me realize a couple things. One, that we have a tendency to build our towns, our communities, and our homes to a very low level, a very vulnerable level. And second, that consumers really are in the dark. They don't really know what's going on. And the most important decision in their life, which is to buy a house, to put their family, their possessions, their whole, lifetime, memories into can be so easily destroyed. And we're seeing that around the country. So I decided, I need to help consumers really become better at the neighborhoods they choose, the homes they choose, and even how they retrofit those homes and what they prioritize. And that's when I decided, upon retiring from the industry, construction industry, 7 years ago, I said, I need to write a book, and I did, and start the Resilience Action Fund, which is the nonprofit that I created, really with a focus on educating consumers. Now, you've seen the book. You also were involved in helping with the documentary, which is based on the book called Built to Last with a question mark. Mm-hmm. And I recommend that everybody watch that. It's been broadcast over 120 times, mostly in the U.S. and mostly by public broadcasting channels, but it's available for free viewing on the website built2last.org. So anybody can see it. It's a 1-hour documentary, and you can see what people, not just in the U.S., but around the world, are doing to protect themselves from hazards. And they are things we can do. The other thing I did that very proudly was released this year, just a few months ago, was the first of its kind buyer's guide to resilient homes. Now, not everybody can talk to me and you and get some pointers when they're looking to buy a home. So this guide is really your friend, your expert uncle, let's say, kind of giving you tips and hints as you're comparing neighborhoods, as you're comparing houses. Yeah, the realtors, they want to steer you toward the kitchen, the closets, the cosmetics, but who's telling you about how safe that location is and how safe that house is to the local hazards? And we have hazards all over this country. East of the U.S., we have flood hazards almost everywhere. We have wind hazards, whether that's tornadoes or hurricanes. And every house has a fire hazard, whether you're near a forest or in a town. Mm-hmm. So things that we should be looking at to make our families and our pocketbooks more resilient. So I'm very proud of that. It's available online. It's free. We're hoping to keep making it more user-friendly, but please take a look at it, especially if you're looking to move to a new neighborhood or a new home. And finally, we have kind of our what I call comic series, because I think we need to bring the language of resilience down to the level where even our children can understand it, because they are the future. We saw in Rob, mm-hmm. the youth network, of course, that's over 18, mm-hmm. but how about people, kids in elementary school and high school? Mm-hmm. So we created the Ask Uncle Rezi illustrated education series, where I kind of made a cartoon out of myself. And Uncle Rezi is an uncle to a young boy, Stevie, whose family is looking to move to a new neighborhood, a new home. And they're kind of learning in the process of, through Stevie, mm-hmm. From Uncle Rezi, what things to watch out and be careful about. So if we can achieve that, if we can bring it to language that everybody can understand, hopefully everybody will learn from this guide and from our show as to things they should do to make their future home, if not their current home, built to survive.
Yeah, as he said, so what a great collection of resources. We have the book, we have the documentary, and we have this show where we're going to illustrate all of those topics. And I love what you said, Uncle Rezi, now bringing it down to the children, the kids in the families to learn about it as well. As you said, following Rob and his generation, there'll be the next generation of kids coming up.
Exactly. So we hope you've enjoyed this show and come back to see us as we talk to more people and on more topics to learn more about what's really the underlying cause of our vulnerability, that V, and how we can do things in a way to survive, built to survive.
So we'll be bringing on experts with other shows, and certainly this whole topic, building to survive, being resilient. And that's what we hope to then show each and every time.
Thank you for watching us, and be resilient.